Hello, guys. Welcome. So we'll start in 5 minutes. Okay, let's start. So first of all, welcome to our webinar. I'm Vlad Spencer from World Learning. Along with me are my colleagues, Laken, Aaron, Laurel, Jill, and probably some other colleagues from the exchange unit, the global exchange unit of World Learning. Some of you know us because you've been with us in exchanges. Some of you don't know us, and now you are going to learn more a little bit about the program. The essence of this is that these webinars are produced now during this challenging and strange period of COVID-19, where our limited opportunity to have in-person contact meant translated into exchanges being suspended for the time being. So we thought that it might be a good idea to reach out to our alumni, to people who came to exchanges or maybe know about us or larger networks, in order to start discussing important issue like the economic development during and post COVID, which is the theme of this webinar. Just a couple of words about how it's been produced. It is produced by World Learning, by the team that I just mentioned to you, working with Digital Communication Network, which is a coalition of digital communicators that started in Europe and now spread worldwide. The theme today is the economic situation during COVID and what could be the outcomes of this healthcare crisis in economics as it relates to small and medium-sized enterprises. It is a topic of great interest that it is on everybody's mind. I would say that in addition to the healthcare theme itself, this is probably the theme that concerns the most. This specific webinar is focused mostly through the speakers on South Asia. However, I'm sure that it has relevance for many other regions, and I hope that we have audience from other regions as well. As you know, not unlike the United States, situation related to COVID in South Asia is pretty serious in terms of number of cases, number of deaths, and also in terms of the idea of closing economies versus reopening them, which more or less happened at the same time in the United States and South Asia mid-June. And we are going to see, more or less what were the consequences of that. A little bit of homework in relation to Zoom. So as many of you know, because we live these days on social media, Zoom is a very interactive platform. So it allows you to introduce yourself, to talk about your work, and most important, to ask questions in the chat room. After the initial presentations, we are going to go through the chat room questions and ask our speakers some of those questions. Our advice and our request is to mute your microphones when you are not speaking, because otherwise, generate certain echo. Zoom improved tremendously since the beginning of the crisis. The safety is much better. But if for whatever reason, we get technical problems during the broadcast, either maybe a moderator would replace me, or we could resume it if the technical problem is serious. Hopefully, we're not going to have any of that. So again, welcome to our webinar. Welcome to our brainstorming and discussion about this important topic. And I would like to give the floor now to Dr. Farah Arif from Pakistan for the initial presentation. The presentations are going to focus mostly on the current situation, on predictable outcomes of the crisis post-COVID, and practical advice for small and medium-sized businesses and for the general population in terms of how to deal with this serious healthcare crisis and its economic implications. So, Dr. Arif, you have the floor.
Right, thank you. So thank you for joining us, guys. I'm from Pakistan and interestingly representing a small business. So I am running a technology company. I'm a startup, 2 years old startup. So when COVID happened, of course, it was not easy for us as well. But yes, we had to come up with something. So what I'm gonna share with you are my two major insights, which I had during these COVID days. And of course, we are still facing because the things have not yet settled down. And we are hoping that in the next 6 months or so, things will settle down. A quick introduction of my company. As I've told you, this is a startup. We are into the space of education technology. And our mission, vision, whatever you would like to say, is to extend learning to masses through blended learning ecosystem. Now, my first combination of insights, which I have derived from the COVID days, was dynamics of new normal. Everybody is talking about this new normal. So I have also, this definition of new normal, but I have divided into these three elements. So first, new normal was for us was that we started working from home. So this work from home phenomenon was so new to us because we are so used to work from a physical space. And I remember about a year ago, because I'm a technology company, so I had an option to hire people who wanted to work from home. And guess what? I simply rejected those options. I was so into this that yes, people have to be, in the physical environment, and we need to develop the culture. And how can I do the supervision when people are working from, from not my office space and actually remotely? So a business like me, who was so much into the physical space, we had to jump into this remote working. So this was a new normal for us. Now there were some positives, but there were some negatives. So I'm going to my second point, that in this new normal, the exciting thing was that I came to know that actually productivity of people has changed amazingly. For example, and I call it productivity rule of 50-50. So I have team members whose productivity has really touched to 150%. They were like doing 50% more what they used to do. But then I had team members and their productivity has like literally came down by 50%. So I call it like 50-50% productivity rule. I don't know what happened, but this is what I have witnessed. And the third element which I noticed was the leadership in crisis. So being the leader, being the founder, being the CEO of the company, I had to go into this crisis situation where, my revenues were shrinking and I had to pay people almost the same kind of salaries. And of course, they were expecting from me. And simultaneously, I had to keep my team motivated so that, I can have a higher output. So this was a very strange kind of a thing for me. And therefore, I call it like leadership in crisis. I did come out of it because eventually our company's productivity has actually gone up. We did manage to generate revenues. And interestingly, because we were 2 years old startup, this time was very crucial for us because this was the third year. And as you understand, in the life of the startup, the third year is the most crucial because this is the make or break year. We became positive. So that's another bright side of it, that though we were in COVID, though we were facing this tough situation, but we became positive and actually we are having exponential growth. So now I would like to touch upon, what I'm looking for, like, so what is going to happen in the future? This is like my insight. Now the future is going to be the next normal and it's going to be the paradigm shift. And in my view, there are three components of it. We are going to shift from physical space to the virtual space, but to what extent? Again, it would vary from business to business. So a business like me has really started thinking about it. Perhaps we don't need the physical space at all. My team can meet with each other in a coffee shop. We don't need the expensive offices. We can operate from our homes, from the comfort of our homes, I would say. So new HR practices would definitely emerge. For example, I myself has become so flexible to people, to people's physical space, to people timings. I'm more interested in the objectivity. There is more transparency. For example, you have to do tasks. I've become more task oriented, but at the same time, you can have more fun in your life because you have a lot of flexibility. So therefore, I think that the productivity will definitely go up even in the post-COVID days. But the most interesting thing which I found was that people who were having slack in their lifestyle, who didn't want to change much, who were so fond of the routine kind of a work, they're not going to survive. Why? Because now, in the true sense, we need the growth mindset. Because post COVID, a lot of businesses would disrupt, a lot of practices will disrupt. Then you have to be in that learning mode. And actually, more than ever, we need innovation mindset. So if you are not inclined towards innovative solutions, then perhaps you won't be able to survive. But the best part is that what I can see, that new businesses will emerge in the post-COVID days. And we also don't know what kind of new businesses, though we have somewhat of an idea. For example, the physical spaces have gone to the virtual spaces. So there's a lot of businesses that we can see which are in the technology side. So this is the bit from my side. And if you have questions, you can ask, or later on, of course, we can have more detailed discussion about it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arif. So next speaker is Vendra. Vendra is an entrepreneur from India that I met. I don't even remember how many years ago, Vendra, but at that time he was in Bangalore, and he impressed me as one of the most dynamic young persons I've met in this space. So I'm very curious, what has happened since your exchange, Vendra, but most importantly about your assessment in relation to the economic impact of COVID. So, Ravendra, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Vlad, and a big namaste to everyone from India. Thank you very much for your overwhelming turnout to this webinar. And at this moment, I would like to thank Digital Communication Network Southeast European Hub for providing this opportunity and hosting this webinar. So in this short talk, I would like to focus on two things. How our SMBs in India are facing this COVID-19 situation at that moment. And next, I would like to provide some tips based on a short interviews that I had conducted with 10 leaders of small and medium businesses. So coming to COVID situation in India, let's take a stock of the SMB sector in India. There are, the SMB sector contributes to approximately 45% of annual industrial output, and they contribute to 37.5% of Indian GDP and close to 40% of overall exports in India. And if we look at the employment, SMBs provide employment for 60 million women and men in India. If you want to take a perspective of this, this population is close to the population of Italy or South Africa. And annually, the SMBs create 1.3 million new jobs, which is equivalent to population of Estonia or Trinidad and Tobago. So we, prior to COVID started spreading in India, the economy was slowing and these SMBs have been struggling to grow faster and struggling to meet their targets. On March 20th, 24th, 2020, the government of India, to contain the spread of COVID-19, they initiated a 21-day lockdown, which has extended up to 4 months. So during this period, lots of businesses suffered loss in revenues. And an interesting thing that has happened was a lot of workers have migrated from their location of employment to like their native locations, like they were heading back to their homes. And third thing was due to interruption in global supply chains, the SMBs which have been dependent on raw materials from the imports struggle to find and procure these raw materials locally, and that has disrupted their plans to produce at these crisis hours. So given this situation, what is at stake? So close to 21% of overall revenues of SMBs are at stake, and approximately 25% of these overall SMBs are likely to default on their loans, and close to 25 million employees are likely to lose their jobs. So this is an equivalent to population of Australia. So the stakes are very high, and the situation is very grim. And I do not have to emphasize on importance to revive this SMB sector. So moving on to what happened, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, the lockdown by the government has been lifted, even though the lockdown is continuing in some clusters across different geographies in this country, where there are high incidence of COVID-19 cases. So a survey has been conducted to understand the economic recovery. And if you look at the top corporates, 70% of the top corporate organizations are functioning at 70% of their capacity. However, if we look at the SMBs, they are operating only at the 30% of the SMBs are operating. So despite lifted situation of the lockdown, fewer number of SMBs are operating due to the panic of spreading the pandemic, and I mean the COVID-19 infection. And second thing, the access to finances has crunched. I mean, there is little access to finances, and the workforce have migrated, and it has become a difficult situation for the SMBs to get the workforce back into their jobs. So given these situations, the experts are estimating that it might take 2 to 3 years for the SMB sector to revive and reach pre-COVID levels. So that's like we are into a sort of long haul here. And so based on, I mean, in order to assist the SMBs, maybe I conducted a short survey with 10 leaders from the SMBs, and I would like to present their perspectives on how SMBs can confront these challenges that are emerging dynamically from this COVID-19 and different changes in the businesses. So first thing is there has been an apathy from the government towards these SMBs. So nobody cares if a SMB winds up, and so the onus is on the leadership of the SMBs to ensure that they survive this phase. So I mean, like the leaders of the SMBs should ensure that they survive this pandemic and thrive on the opportunities after the pandemic has ended. And second thing is, it's important to hire a public health expert, or like consult the public health experts if you're reopening your businesses. Because there are several instances, we have seen several instances where few of the businesses have to shut down due to the fact that these businesses have become center of spread of these COVID-19 infections. So it's important to hire these public health experts, or follow the government regulations, talk to some doctors who can provide you, who can assess and provide you right inputs for your business to start your operations. Third thing is shelve unnecessary expenditure. So if some expenditure is, I mean, like if you can postpone spending on something, you just make sure that you don't spend it at the moment. Have some cash with you so that it will be useful for you to produce more goods or provide more services when the pandemic ends, and so that you can be in a competitive position to address the shortage of these products and services. And interestingly, at this moment, the availability of debt has become cheaper. So the SMBs can negotiate with their borrowers, I mean, with their lenders and banks to, to arrive at a very low interest rates and extend moratorium period so that they can start paying these loans after after the businesses achieves 100% of operations, and they can extend the tenure of the loans. So these provide an opportunities for the SMBs to invest or plan for the long term, like invest in capital assets, plan for producing more goods in a short period of time. And another opportunity is there are like very fresh, talented graduates from the universities at the moment, and there are also experienced experienced individuals in different aspects of the business who lost their jobs due to the pandemic. So it's an opportune time for the SMBs to hire this talent and innovate, ideate, and develop strategies to continue their operations during this pandemic. So with these points, I would like to stop here. I'm open to take more questions during the interactive session. And let us all survive this pandemic and thrive after the pandemic ends. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravindra. So, going along with Ravindra's appeal to you, I'm very happy to see so many people in the chat room. This is a global conversation. We have people from Africa, from Europe, from Asia. So it's extremely exciting. Again, start asking questions. Your questions are the best guides on where we should take this webinar. In the meantime, let me introduce, Tony. Tony, again, one person that I don't remember exactly how many years ago we met. We worked in an exchange program on small business development, and Tony is extremely active, person in this space of small business support in the United States. Worked in Oklahoma, now he works in Mississippi. So his area of specialty is trade, but I'm sure that his presentation will go beyond that, including maybe certain aspects of how is it going in terms of economic impact here in the United States. So Tony, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for taking your time to be in on the presentation today. I see a lot of familiar names, so thank you everyone for participating. I agree, this is a global conversation, and one of the best values I think from this type of event is for us to realize how we're all, and by that I mean everyone on this planet Earth, how we're all kind of in this together, and finding solutions. My focus would be on international trade, but through the perspective of small, medium enterprises. And I've been working in the space for years. Yeah, actually, Vlad, you and I first met on an exchange program, I think with Brazil, and had an opportunity in South Asia, Pakistan. And so this is a global conversation. I should say my story itself is kind of interesting because I was working in Oklahoma in what's called International Trade Center, Small Business Development Center, which is a national model in the United States to provide assistance to SMEs when it comes to international trade. So it's a national model, but it's really also a global model. And I was hired officially. I had just returned. Besides working to help small businesses through these centers, which I'll explain real briefly, I also do international consulting, and I had just returned from a trip from East Timor and got back to the United States, I think 1 or 2 days. This is mid-March, right before everything was shutting down. So I also felt some of that impact myself as an entrepreneur. Let's talk about in the United States. We've had a government response. By that I mean the federal government that we have in the United States, the Small Business Administration, or SBA. And the SBA found itself in March scrambling to help create programs to help offset this pandemic's impact on small, medium-sized businesses. At the time, we could tell it was going to be major, didn't know how long it was going to go on for. And so there were 2 main programs in the United States that were initiated, and they've been extended a couple of times. One is the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, and the EIDL, which is Emergency Injury Disaster Loans. So we see this as being part of a response to a disaster or business continuity from the SBA perspective. These programs have changed over time. Some of them were a little complicated. Some have been, from some perspectives, controversial, but they've been very helpful, I can tell you, and they've continued to evolve. There were just some notices that we received that some of these programs have been extended again. So some of you, wherever you are in the world, you may have read some stories about different small businesses that received assistance through these programs, and some returned the money. But one of the things is going to be compliance. There's a lot of details to how the money can be used for each of these programs. Also, we have state and local programs. For instance, in Mississippi, we have a Back to Business Mississippi program. These are generally grants, which means that funds don't have to be repaid. But my center at the University of Mississippi in Oxford, Mississippi, which I'm still working from Oklahoma because of the pandemic, we're part of what's called the Small Business Development Center National Network. The program at Oklahoma State University was also part of that program. So in the United States, there's a very organized national program to provide assistance to small business throughout the country according to our definitions. Of course, these programs have had to pivot in light of COVID-19. So a lot of the focus over the past few months, if not most of the focus, has been on helping small, medium-sized enterprises and entrepreneurs survive and thrive in these times. And I should say that initially the focus was on that, on survival. As we're moving forward, there's been openings in, as we call it here in the United States, so different states have different programs to open up their states to business, and it's not a national approach to this. So as we still are in the survival mode, we also have to start thinking about how to expand business as well. My focus is in international trade, and I just like to always bring up, and a lot of people around the world may know this or not, but international trade is not just products. I always like to summarize it as goods, services, technologies, and of course now we're talking a lot about e-commerce, which e-commerce can be a way to find international buyers for goods, services, and technologies. There's different platforms that sell goods. Everyone has heard of Amazon and other similar programs, but there's also programs to connect freelancers that do consulting. I know people who do international work, so they're exporters through these platforms. So what are some of the challenges? There's been, especially initially, there was a hardening, I would say, of import-export regulations. I'm a former US Customs official, so I'm very intimately familiar with the regulation of trade. But right after this pandemic started taking hold, governments around the world also had responses to the pandemic. And one was initially, there was a hardening of import-export regulations, especially on PPE, which we'll talk about a little bit as being an opportunity as well. We've also had, value chain, supply chain disruptions. How do you get your products and services to where they're going if shipping lines and airlines are shut down? And also created a lot of problems. People may have had a model to determine what the costs are to get a good to a particular market. A lot of that was upended, and it still is so. So figuring out how to react on the fly to those supply chain disruptions has been a big deal. Logistics and transportation, they go hand in hand with that. International travelers, borders have been closed. So a lot of exports are services, including international tourism. So we've had issues with that, as well as people that are involved in international trade may have traveled on business. Closing of borders to international travelers has been a major impact and major challenge as well. I also see a lot of opportunities. There are tons and tons of webinars and other programs from the United Nations to governments to donors to help SME firms that are involved in international trade adapt to COVID-19. I think there's also growing consumer awareness of wanting to support small, medium-sized businesses worldwide. International trade and services, I think that there's a huge upside and a lot of potential to grow the international trade and services as a result of the pandemic. From our own computers, we can work on international projects. I continue myself to do that as well, and I know some of our consultants that are speakers do that as well. PPE, personal protection equipment, that's a big deal. It's not without a lot of regulations. However, I know countries such as India and Pakistan both have tried to promote exports of PPE for small, medium-sized enterprises through some of these e-commerce platforms. I can say, once again, as a former customs official, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of how you can make your goods actually admissible into whatever foreign market you're trying to export to. There's a lot of regulations, especially when it comes to medical equipment. The improvements in our communication technologies, most people on this webinar use WhatsApp. A lot of Americans don't even know what WhatsApp even is. So you're already well, positioned to be able to adapt to those opportunities that come from these improved communication platforms, Zoom, Microsoft Teams as well. e-commerce. Everyone knows e-commerce and knows it's a great opportunity. Once again, when you're exporting into other markets, I think sometimes there's not enough focus or understanding on the regulation of international commerce. That's a whole nother subject. Export restrictions, most countries or many countries around the world put restrictions on the export of PPE from their own countries. And so this whole environment, the regulation of trade is still being figured out. World Trade Organization and others have been very vocal about their position of not wanting to shut down international trade as a result of the pandemic. In the US, we have customs and the Food and Drug Administration, which is going to regulate a lot of the PPE. But I've already seen tons of horror stories of people trying to jump on this boom and not really understanding the regulation of trade and having issues with their masks and gloves and sanitizers, not meeting FDA and other requirements and losing a lot of money. And so that's my presentation. Thank you very much. There's my email there and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Tony. Let me just kind of stop the presentation thing. I think Rehan, I think that he's on microphone and video has a kind of export related question. So Rehan, if you could unmute your microphone and ask your question directly, it would be great. If not, I will convey the question. Can you do it, Rehan?
Okay. Yes. Hello, everyone.
Please ask the question.
Yeah, what should I do because I have no export business due to coronavirus, due to COVID-19. There is no shipment from Pakistan to Europe and to America. So what should I do now?
Okay, so Tony, sure, it's difficult for you to probably respond such a specific question, but if you have any general advice, it would be great. And I think that he was also mentioning export of medical equipment.
Sure.
Specifically, all
Yes.
this industry is heavily disrupted by COVID. So what are your thoughts about this, Tony?
Yeah, there's great opportunities like anything planning. I'm not a stickler for theory and textbook teaching of international trade because as you see, whatever companies may have done in December may be totally useless at this time. But there's still a large piece that has to do with planning and understanding. I always say whatever the context is today. So there are opportunities. And then there's also those other issues that I said that we have to look at, the challenges such as logistics. It goes back to regular business. Are you going to be priced out of the market because you can't get your goods to that destination market today and may change in 3 weeks? But I think the regulation of trade is important. What I recommend, and I have looked into a little, I know in Pakistan, India, Nepal, and other countries, there are programs that provide assistance to small, medium enterprises and entrepreneurs that are interested in that. And so this is really not something you learn in a class or two if you've never done it. It's really has to be something that you're into this for the long haul, but seek assistance, seek out those programs around the world, donors. The United Nations has some programs. Learn as much as you can, piece it all together and go from there. I'd be happy. You've got my email, I can give you some guidance as well and connect you with other resources. But it's really something to do well in this. You have to learn, but you have to adapt. And it's not about the trendy terminology and marketing that a lot of us learned, in business classes. The real world right now, especially, is very much in a state of flux. But those who know how to adapt to those changes, and 6 months from now, there will be other changes. So hope that makes sense. But one thing is to seek out assistance. You need a plan, you need a business plan and things like that, but not a rigid exercise as a check mark to say you did one and you got a grade in a class. This is something that has to be realistic.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Definitely. So, one general point about this, these webinars are meant, obviously for discussing issues, but also for connecting. So please stay in touch with Tony, please stay in touch with other people. Already in the chat, Rehan, you have a suggestion that you might pursue. So look at the chat because again, the chat is also a place where we are trying to connect people in ways that are productive. So let's move on. Unfortunately, Riaz cannot be with us. He's somewhere in the mountains of Balochistan without connection. So unfortunately, we'll have to reschedule him for another webinar. So that we'll move to Saurav. From Nepal. He was in an exchange program sponsored by the Office of Citizen Exchanges of the State Department in the fall 2018. We kept in touch, as we have kept in touch with most of our exchange participants. So Saurav, you have the floor. Obviously, the situation in Nepal is slightly different. Number of cases, number of deaths. Thanks God, lower than usual. But at the same time, the tourism industry tremendously hit, which is the lifeline of the economy in Nepal. So it's fascinating to hear from you as well. So Saurav, thanks for joining us. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Vlad. Thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank Digital Communication Network Southeast Europe Hub and World Learning, and special thanks to Vlad for this opportunity. Namaste and greetings from Nepal. As we know that Nepal has been in lockdown since March 24th, and still we are in the lockdown, but the modality has changed from past, the beginning and now. And in this situation, we never imagined that, never predict that the lockdown will get this long, and because we were predicting that this will end soon. So especially, first few weeks of the lockdown, the context was a bit different, as most of them were very optimistic that lockdown would end soon and they could resume their work. But now majority of the startup has stopped functioning, and a lot of, not only startup, major of the businesses has gone down. And like Vlad said, the businesses that mostly impacted is tourism, and almost more than half of the economy depend upon the tourism. So I have a brief presentation. I think Aaron have to help me with the slide. So right now the situation is uh, the job created by SMEs is 2.36 million, and 8.5% is the growth rate. Almost 22% is the contribution to the GDP from SMEs. But now, likely due to COVID, it will be predicted to reduce from 2 to 3%. So the majorly hit sectors are tourism, transportation, have cafes, restaurants. So most of the businesses has already shut down, and people are trying to get back to e-commerce business just to fight this COVID, and building up with the new strategies. So right now, the SMEs are facing up a lot of problems. So my startup, I'll just start with mine. So I'm the founder of Discover City. Discover City runs a smart parking solution in Nepal, in the capital city. So we depend upon the vehicles, parking vehicles and all. So due to lockdown, it's been four months. We have not charged anyone with the parking fees, and we have almost 50 plus staff working in our team, and it's being very difficult for us to provide them full salary till date. So past 2 months we provided them with the full payment, but now due to lack of revenue, the business is not operating. So it's being quite a challenge for us. So hopefully we look for a better option in coming days. So we are moving ahead strongly. So the Nepal Reserve Bank also has provided some of the facilities for the startup. So there has been some of the concession from the government, the support from the government,
If
and
you could go closer to
the
the
government
microphone, it
has
would be great because we cannot hear
regulated
you.
to shift the VAT and tax for the collection of the dates for the startup and other businesses also. So basically the businesses which is mostly hit due to the COVID, and the government also planned to reduce the interest rate from the banks by 2 to 3%. So, which is also a small relief for the startup. And the main problem of the startup are facing is, the money, including salary and rent. This is because most of the startup generally do not have a backup of the working capital in Nepal. The majority of Nepali business functions on the bootstrapping model. So which is meaning they maintain their cash flow with monthly sales of their goods and services. So there has been few startup backed by investors, but not all. So it's a quite a challenging time, and so far is so we as a startup in Nepal are also looking things positively, and looking for better opportunities also. So in every pandemic, like, we have to be optimistic, and we have to move ahead accordingly. So, what we expect from the government till now is to create more packages that can actually, target the startup and other businesses, and give the interest waiver for at least a year. So, rescheduling of loans by year, can help startup cover up their loss during this COVID. So electricity bills by 50%. So maybe this all things can come up with a help as for the startup. So there has been few startup backed by investors, like I said, but not everyone. So like our business is solely controlled by our own self funding, and other businesses also, like the businesses that I know closely, with whom we work together, are also facing a hard time. So there's a in Nepal right now, in tourism sector, like a lot of business has already shut down. The hotel businesses, to handicraft suppliers, to other restaurants are already closing. So still the landlords are, asking for the rent. People are not willing to give the rent waiver for them. So these all things, the government is still feeling to coordinate with the house owners to deal all these situations. So it's kind of a little chaos, and a very bad situation for now. But we hope that things will go better, and there will be some better changes will come after this lockdown. So this is it, I think, from my side, and thank you for this opportunity. And let's survive this COVID, and let's stay safe. Uh, Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And again, there's a question in the chat room about opportunities to continue to work together. We have an alumni network of our exchanges. That one might be a good place. Maybe my colleagues could post it in the chat room, and this would allow us to continue discussions about economics, about something else. I'm just curious. There are a couple of questions, and I'm not sure if there's anybody's expertise on that. But one, talking about areas of opportunity, means one area of opportunity that actually has developed throughout, COVID, in the United States at least, is e-commerce. So I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts about, the impact of this crisis on e-commerce, and how do you see this evolving in the years to come? If anybody has any thoughts about this issue.
So
Yeah.
yeah, Vlad.
Sure.
I can come. I
Sure,
can come
no
after Sarah. So, Sarah, if you would like to pitch in first, and then I'll.
So Vlad, I have a start. I mean, my startup it's totally connected to e-commerce, and I think in Nepal also e-commerce is growing, because that's the only thing that people can do staying home. So, like I said, pandemic is not only a chaotic scene, it's also opportunity. and people are turning out to be a chef from online, creative, idea makers, bringing in few creative stuff and selling it online, and uh, totally, it's a different platform here. And even in my business, we are now going to a digital payment system, so we will be taking all the parking payments through online, because due to COVID, it's very difficult to exchange the money also due to the viruses. So we are also trying to go cashless and going with the digital payments.
Yeah, definitely. And this is an area of fascination for many of us. This idea that the worst of a crisis, there are creative minds that actually are seizing opportunities, and in the process becoming very successful and very productive. So, Dr. Arif.
Yeah, so I would like to share some insights that how small businesses, are trying to survive in Pakistan. So one of the biggest challenges, as one of the friend was also saying, Rehan Ashraf, that how can I do the exports? So of course, exports are going to come down. So then people have started looking the opportunities, the internal opportunities. So the country like Pakistan, which has a huge population, so there are perhaps a lot of opportunities that small business enterprises can look inside. So let me share an anecdote with you. So what people who had fruit farms, of course, their exports have come down because of the pandemic. So they started looking at the internal distribution channels. Now the issue is that the internal distribution channels are also slowed down because people are not going out. So they're not going to buy the fruits and the vegetables the way they used to. Now, what I have noticed that these small farms have actually bypassed the intermediaries, and because they did not have their own websites, they had started using Facebook as their channel. So a lot of people, a lot of small businesses were using Facebook, but many others who were not using Facebook as their channel of distribution and for the revenue generation, they have started doing it. So what do they go to Facebook, they put an ad there, that okay, we are selling mangoes for this much price, and they have this digital payment system in place as well. So for example, they give you their numbers. So now even in Pakistan, because of COVID, there's a lot of traffic on the digital payments. So if you have a bank account or if you have a mobile wallet, so now you don't need to go out, but you can send money through that digital channel. So I can see now that a lot of businesses have actually changed their distribution channel. They have went online, started using the social platforms to sell their products, and they have also become cashless. So again, in the times of pandemic, where a lot of things have gone wrong, two major things which I believe in the countries like Pakistan have really, that's a good news for us. A, people have become digital. Now they are happy to do digital payments. Previously, they were not. It's a very cash intensive economy. And the second thing is that people have started pushing the boundaries. They have started taking the risk. The buyer is also taking somewhat of the risk, and the consumer has also started taking some risk. It's a good news for e-commerce, especially in post-pandemic days.
Great points. So let's move on. Let's go to our speaker, Namrata, from Chennai, India. Again, Tamil Nadu, one of the most important hubs of economic development. I've been here, 2 or 3 times. Fascinating place in terms of economy. So I'm very interested to hear, what is the impact of COVID, on the province and on its economy. So, Namrata.
Thank you, Vlad. Hi, everybody. It's been fantastic listening to everybody. It seems like the same story globally, and it's really funny that we're dealing with a pandemic, which has been unifying in a very strange way. So just a little about myself. I dabble in 3 different roles, and that's where my perspectives come from. I've been part of international trade and investment as a consultant for over 10 years, and that's where I think Tony and I got to meet. I run a social enterprise which works with girls who are differently able, and we make artisan cheese. And I'm also part of a business angel investing forum where I consult startups. So coming from that background, I was thinking, okay, let's talk about how trade and investment has been affected. I know we have covered some of it, but with global supply chain disruptions, and apart from losing, I think Rehan was talking about it, losing global buyers, challenges in transportation, increased freight, additional challenges of losing workforce. So I think the whole issue of migrant workforce traveling back to smaller towns has been a real challenge. So Vlad, if you were to talk about Chennai specifically, there are, I think we're going through the 6th phase of our lockdown right now. So there's been these lockdowns, which the government now has something called Lockdown 5.0, Unlock 1.0. So all these kind of messages are very confusing for people because you don't know when it's ready for you to start work, to get back to work. Tamil Nadu has been an exception in certain ways because the last lockdown that we had was pretty challenging. There was severe restriction in movement, which also meant that you could not foray beyond 2 kilometers from your place where you live. Small businesses obviously have been the worst hit, but I guess all of us know what the challenges are. In terms of what the government has been doing, there have been various financial packages, but as it is most of the time, for that to sort of trickle down to actually people reaping the benefits of that, I think that's a long haul. It's not a very easy one. It's rather complicated. I think Ravindra mentioned in his presentation that it's more easier to sort of get debt. Debt is sort of more easily available. But I was also thinking, so what are some of the positives which have actually come around? You just mentioned e-commerce. I think that's been one of the biggest thing out here as well, that you see a lot of smaller companies, everybody going online, trying to create a digital presence, whether it's more sort of prominent Facebook profile, or I would actually say that Instagram has been gaining a lot of popularity with small businesses in India. One of the interesting things that I've noticed is actually people getting more transparent about the businesses. I think people have used, or entrepreneurs have actually used this time very effectively in connecting with a wide range of customers and talking about their businesses, which has been really great to see. I mean, the number of I joke about this, but I think people have been spending 50%. I think Dr. Arif mentioned something about 50-50 productivity. I think 50% of the time working from home is on Instagram, and the other 50% is actually on working. So while the unpredictability of the duration and the lockdown and the aids from the government are still unclear, what is it that companies can actually do to stay nimble? I think some of the key things is going online, digitizing, becoming more transparent about the businesses, and connecting with their customers. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Now let me see if I could reach out to some people in the audience. I'm not sure if Vasilina is hearing me, and if she has camera or microphone to ask the question about access to resources. If not, I could kind of paraphrase the question. So Vasilina, can you hear me? Probably not. So her question is mostly, for businesses, small businesses, people interested in this field, what are your recommendations about resources they could reach out to use for information and for handling dealing with the crisis? So anybody?
May I say something real quick, Vlad?
Sure, Tony.
I would just reiterate using those programs in your countries sometimes that provide assistance to small, medium enterprises. I'm always amazed how many people in the United States, for instance, don't even know we have a small business development center network, and that it's based on a model that receives funding from the Small Business Administration and the universities. So long story short, we provide most of our assistance at no charge. And I know, I've traveled the world and know it's a topic that's important to me, that there are programs like this all around the world. And so get to know what those resources are and use them.
And by the way, so Tony, is active all around the world developing this type of resources. He mentioned that program where he met in Brazil, and that program was specifically meant to create structure for helping small and medium-sized businesses. Using US to some extent as a model, but promoting this idea that private sector and the government should support small and medium-sized businesses. And I know, Ravendra, that this has been, at least in the past, one of your interests. You're very much connected with the ecosystem of incubators, accelerators. What is going on in this space, in the context of COVID, Ravendra?
So if you look at the incubators, how the ecosystem for these SMBs and the startups are supporting the organizations during this COVID. So right now they are innovating on moving the goods. So people are stuck and the goods can be moved across. So there has been, as discussed, there has been an excessive emphasis on e-commerce, listing these small businesses, startups on the e-commerce platforms. And also there has been several innovation happening in the logistics space. For example, somebody who's making cakes can depend on the orders on social media. However, to deliver, these business owners cannot go out. So for them, some existing logistics and food delivery organizations like Zomato and Swiggy are stepping in, and they are doing this kind of deliveries. And another startup by name Dunzo, which is very interesting. So they do small activities for you. So say you want to deliver your, you're a small startup, you want to deliver say there's a team who are weaving some masks and they want to deliver these masks. So there are certain organizations like Dunzo, startups like Dunzo, which are getting into these kind of business. So the entire logistics and e-commerce space has been reinventing and innovating over there. And the businesses which are producing goods and selling goods have been tuned to adopt to these kind of practices. So goods can be moved when the people are locked in places, like from the industries, from the manufacturers. However, how do we move the services? So there have been attempts to move educational services to online, which has been a very good successful model. However, other essential services like healthcare infrastructure is like one has to still go to the hospital. So the healthcare did not adopt the digitization, and healthcare technologies did not adopt to the digitizations yet. So there have been focus on moving the payments to digitization, which has been quite successful in India. Indian payment and fintech ecosystem is quite thriving, and it's advanced as good as advanced economies. And coming to other point on how do we improve the service? India's is close to like 65% of Indian economy is services based. So if we can innovate in this space and bring in these services to the people who are stuck at homes, so I think that's the next challenge, and that's where the focus has been on the ecosystem at the moment. Glad I'm done.
Yes, thank you. So I'm trying to see if I could connect with Garrett Velasquez if he wants to ask his own question. If not, we could move to other questions. So Garrett, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Sure. So please,
okay,
there
great.
was a question about marketing, and probably you are the best to ask the question. First of all, if you could introduce yourself, it would be great.
Yeah, definitely. I'm Garrett. I'm from San Antonio, Texas. And my question was kind of on how the panel sees like marketing evolving. So I think kind of like my specific interest would be in kind of building relationships with customers, through like a digital space or maybe still in person, or kind of how that's like evolving in this like new business environment. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Garrett. And thanks for being part of this. So anybody would like to tackle this question? Dr. Farah?
Yeah, so as I was saying that this pandemic has also created opportunities for us. So for example, we all understand, this consumer funnel. So you need to now understand that perhaps the engagement with the customer is perhaps the only thing that can really save us, because if a consumer is engaged with you, and you have to engage with them digitally, whether you were a digital business or not. So digital businesses actually do a better engagement with customers because the customers are present digitally. You can send them messages, the WhatsApp messages, emails. And the brick and mortar businesses were always struggling, how to engage with the customer once the customer is out. Now, because everybody is in the digital space, and you have now the contact details of your customers as well. So you got their email addresses, you got their cell phone numbers, because they are engaging with you in the digital space. I think this is a time, as we say, customer management systems. This is a time to develop your customer engagement strategy, because now you have the data and people are open to share their problems with you as well. You can reach out to your customer, find out what are their real pain points and how can you really solve. Now, in the days of the pandemic, if the business shows a little bit, empathy to the consumers, whether you are into B2C market or B2B market, actually it's gonna help you in developing a long-term relationship. So that's what I've noticed, and this is what we are also practicing. So I think your engagement strategy based on empathy, especially in this point in time, will take you a long way.
Anybody else on this question?
So I would like to add a point. So
Sure.
yeah. So if you're willing to, if you're engaged with your either B2C or B2B customers, so if you're willing to take delayed payments, because we don't know what the other, your customer is going through or your client is going through. So if you're willing to get the payments delayed, accept the payments delayed from your clients. So I think that would build the trust, and at the same time, make sure that your contracts are strong so that these delayed payments are honored by the client. So it affects your cash flow. However, given the slow nature of the economy at the moment, it would definitely help in building the relationship in the long term. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
Yes. Hi, Vlad. I see some questions and discussion going on in the chat room concerning cybersecurity and cyber safety in e-commerce during this COVID period. So just interested to hear if any of our speakers have any thoughts on kind of how that's evolved during this time, or any tips for cybersecurity and safety. I hear some chat about ethical hackers and such. So if anyone wanted to speak up and ask their questions related to that, or if any of our speakers had any thoughts on those topics.
And definitely. And before doing that, I'd like to tell you, because you mentioned, and I actually have to do a little bit of promo about Digital Communication Network. So we had webinars specifically connected or focusing on cybersecurity, and we'll continue to do so. But if any of the panelists have, or audience, they have any thoughts on this topic, please let us know. Anybody?
Actually, I have like a kind of a question come thought. So I am also a digital space business, and I know that there's a lot of anxiety about the cyberspace crimes, and people's information is there. But being it's been now about 3 months or so. But I please correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm also like asking a question here. So is this really that a big threat, or of course this is a threat, but perhaps we are perceiving it as if it's too much and we cannot manage it. So there is always a trade-off, you see. So there, of course, there is a threat. People will come, and your websites can be hacked and systems can be hacked. But is this like, are we blowing it out of proportion? Because then you are also making a lot of, you're scaring people a lot. For example, people won't go online, they won't do the digital payments, people won't go there. go online. They won't do their businesses. So I actually would like to have this discussion around it as well, that though this is a reality, but how huge the reality is. How do we really need to be so much scared that there will be a moment where we will stop going online and doing businesses? Yeah.
Anybody has any thoughts about this?
Yeah.
So yeah, Vlad, recently in
Saurabh?
Nepal, recently in Nepal, due to so I mean, I think cybersecurity is one of the key point, because during this kind of meeting in June, it's mostly we have to be assured that we are in a, I mean, secure zone, because recently Nepal Tourism Board and the Ministry of Tourism, including the minister, there was a webinar from the Zoom, but somehow it was hacked, and some unwanted sound and the documentation, which was very much confidential, was mostly hacked. So they had to shut down the live session also. So this is one of the key concern. And even US embassy in Nepal recently had a webinar on cyber security also. So
Yeah,
I think not on the digital payment side, or not other side of it, maybe when we have a webinar on something, we would probably require the this protocol.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a, first of all, it's a growing business. That is, it's a tremendously important business, because it's so much part of reality. But Dr. Raf has a very good point. That means, there's a huge number of people that actually are so concerned about this thing that they cannot control, that they might avoid digital tools altogether, which increasingly becomes impossible. Means you cannot do it without those tools. So let's hear from Ravendra. And I have kind of a connected question, not necessarily cybersecurity, but connected to this line of thought. So Ravendra, what do you think?
So if you speak to any founders and CEOs of software as a service who are providing software, who have products on software as a service, so you would hear from them that they will get a mail almost every day threatening them that this hacker has these passwords, and they know the architecture of their product. They have the contacts of their customers, and they can they threaten them. They blackmail these founders and CEOs, asking them to pay certain amount of money. So this is a consistent threat where you see it in most of the companies who have these digital products and operate digitally. One mechanism that government of India has implemented is first thing is there has been the ecosystem has a good number of cyber security experts who provide consultation, the incubators and the startup networks themselves have a set of experts who would definitely help startups in these kind of situations. And second thing, the government of India has a very good cyber security cells at different states. And I have seen some instances, during the pandemic, that somebody was offering cheap iPhones. So people started purchasing them. And several digital finance, fake digital finance websites have showed up, and they started, attracting these individuals through their WhatsApp and social media messages, and making them pay to these products which are really fake. So these instances were effectively handled by the state cyber security and IT cells. So if the ecosystem is strong, these kind of problems can be effectively countered and protect the businesses which are going towards digitization. So that's one thing I would like to add. And second thing, there are products which provide a certain cyber security support. So if you take Google Suite, you will immediately have business solutions. If your business is hacked, if your passwords are hacked, you'll definitely get some support. So I would suggest these businesses moving towards digitization to adopt to these kind of products which provide cyber security support along with the regular support they provide. So adopt the best practices so that your businesses operate safely in the digital environment.
Can I just add something real quick, Vlad?
Sure, Tony.
Just a second. Sometimes It also depends on the countries you're dealing with. For instance, if you have customers in the European Union, you may have to protect their data, so that can create compliance issues for you, no matter where you are in the world. And depending on your country as well, it can create financial liabilities. People may sue you in the United States if you don't protect personal information from hackers. You could find yourself in an expensive lawsuit. So some countries' laws could extend to other countries to protect citizens of their nations. That's one thing. And also getting sued. And the third thing is, if you're dealing with the technology, you may not realize that it's controlled by government agencies around the world. So if you have an encryption app and it gets hacked and it ends up in the wrong hands, that could also create you issues, because those technologies can be regulated through international agreements as well as through particular countries.
Definitely. One thing that fascinates me about these global webinars, which when you have exchanges in real life it's not only always possible, is questions like the one that Titus Zayon from Angola is raising. So Titus, if you hear me and if you could unmute your microphone, could you ask the question, or if not, I could ask it for you. Titus? So probably he doesn't hear me. So what he says, he's from Angola. So he says it is difficult to make a payment from Angola because the visa system is almost inexistent. This blocks entrepreneurs from access to platforms for e-commerce. What alternatives may be available to help startups in a country like Angola? So anybody has any thoughts? Because at some point, or one point or another, many countries went through this process that Angola is going through. So any thoughts about this? Anybody knows about means of payment? Yeah.
Right. So usually if you want to list your products on any e-commerce site, they will provide a set of practices on, and what needs to be done, what are the compliances that are required for a startup or an organization to be listed on the e-commerce site. So that also includes support for payment. So one thing that Titus can do is approach the e-commerce websites on which they would like to list their products or services. And second thing is, so there might be definitely an international bank where they can provide a SWIFT code, account with a SWIFT code, and all the international transactions can happen through this SWIFT code. So Titus may raise any request. All the banks are integrated with the SWIFT code. So all that he needs to do is like request an access for the SWIFT code. I think through these mechanisms, they can enable the digital payments. So PayPal is another example. They can integrate PayPal with the payment systems, which PayPal has almost access to all these countries where they provide payment services in the both ways. So
yeah. Thanks, Ravenda. Also, there's a question from Alejandro. So my advice for the speakers is actually to look in the chat a little bit, and maybe if you have any specific advice, because it's about the specific situation in Mexico related to government help. So you could support Alejandro. But I would like to ask, we have time probably for one more question. Along the lines of what Dr. Arif asked in relation to cybersecurity, but in a different field. So right now, one of the major questions in all our countries is the health situation is what it is. The pandemic is still with us. People still die. There's still plenty of cases. On the other hand, sure, there is a need for economic to restart the economies. What are your thoughts in relation to that? Because at the end of the day, it's the reason I say it's similar to what Dr. Arif said, is that there are two important things. In that case was to be secure cybersecurity, but at the same time you have to use it, because otherwise you cannot survive in the economy. In the health situation is that people have to survive, people have to receive medical care, the system has to be sustained, but at the same time, if you don't restart the economies, then there's a huge problem. And there is this rhetoric, mostly recently in the United States, that we have to live with the crisis, restart the economies, and basically deal with the consequences. So any thoughts in relation to this question that seems to be so fundamental these days? Dr. Arif?
Yeah, I think so in Pakistan, So government did impose a lockdown. So in the bigger cities, we have the lockdown, but when I talk to the smaller cities, and especially in the rural areas of Pakistan, so it seems that the life is happening as usual. And it's very surprising. But then that is also another part of the world. So in bigger cities, yes, there is more scare. Government has imposed lockdowns. People are forced to wear masks. People are forced to use sanitizer. So when you go out, you simply cannot go out without wearing mask. Otherwise, you'll be fined. So this is like happening in the bigger cities. Wherever you go in the physical space, there are sanitizers available. But when you go into the smaller cities, and especially the rural areas of Pakistan, where we find out that the incidents of corona are very, very less. Perhaps that's one of the reasons that the supply chain, especially the agriculture supply chain in Pakistan, was not greatly affected. Because in the smaller sites, like in the rural areas, they were producing and they were, they were living their life as usual. So that's another part of the world. So of course, when you look at the media, you really get terrorized. So I think that, and this is the focus that we need to bring in. That the next normal perhaps would be that you have to wear masks, you have to use sanitizers, but you simply cannot sit at home. You have to go out. You do this. We call it's not social distancing. It should be the physical distancing. But you have to go out. So I think this is what we have been practicing in Pakistan to a greater extent. Rehan is smiling. Perhaps Rehan has some other insight as well. Yes.
Let's see. Maybe somebody from India. When the situation was fascinating. You guys were in lockdown for a long time. There was the issue with the migrants going back home. Then the economy reopened. There are all kinds of situations between different states. So what is your thinking in India about this issue? So maybe
Vlad,
Namrata.
I think it's actually very different across different states. There is one state which is in the north, like Himachal, which is heavily reliant on tourism, and they have just opened up saying the hotels have to start taking bookings. Tourists are welcome, no checking, which I think can really be scary. On the other hand, you have another state which has a lot of tourism, and they have said we don't want tourists for a year's time. Yes, so tourism on one side, but then it's also about businesses getting back to work. The lockdown, like I said, we still have a lockdown going on in Tamil Nadu, for example, which is for 5 districts, which are heavily impacted. So I think a lot of businesses have to take that ownership. It cannot go back to business as usual. You cannot have all the people rushing back to work. We have seen that work from home is fantastic. It is possible. So wherever businesses can actually happen from home, you should let and encourage people to work from home, because the threat of the pandemic is still out there, and it is real, and it is unwise, I think, in certain ways to have everybody coming. So it could be staggered timings. Workforce can actually have a part work from home, part coming to office when it's really necessary. But I think at the end of the day, the government really cannot enforce, because we're too big a nation as well. So a lot of companies have to take up that responsibility. And these could be minor things. I mean, the whole idea of, it's not so much social distancing, because we are social animals, like they say. We have to get back to some kind of a normalcy from before. But physical distancing, wearing the mask, being mindful of others, all of these things, which could be really small, but should be taken into consideration and probably put into a manual saying this is the new HR practice manual and people need to follow this.
Definitely. Tony, any thoughts?
No, I think that it's just going to require flexibility. And once again, I reiterate that we don't know what we don't know at this point. And we're kind of getting a better picture of even how just last couple of days, just new news on how supposedly the virus even spreads. There were some new guidelines put out here in the United States, but also through the World Health Organization, saying that I believe it's more through the air rather than falling to the ground. So we don't really I think our reactions to the pandemic, both from an economic standpoint as well as a health standpoint, we all need to be flexible, and everything's going to change as we find out more over time. And for entrepreneurs and small, medium sized businesses to first survive and then continue to thrive, I think flexibility is the key. And to be honest, a lot of companies, a lot of small businesses in the past haven't been so flexible as they need to be. And society as well, because we're all in this together.
Definitely. Saurav, anything about this topic?
Yes, I think I'll just add on what Namrata and Dr. Arif said, So, in Nepal also the scenario is quite different. We've been in lockdown since past 4 months. And if you look at the stat back in 2 months, the cases was less than 100 entire Nepal. And now the cases is closely 20,000. And, everyone was locked up at their house, without moving around. They had like a lot of things going on. People were very much taking precautions on, while going out also, and at least one member from one family was out. So, and right now, all the members are out. People are taking it very normally. There's no mask also, it's actually not that easy to, live a life, wearing a mask all the time, and we are conscious, we know what we are doing, but still, sometimes we miss out the wearing a mask, or putting our hand on our face or something like this. So maybe, we all have to move together strongly, at this hard time. But things might get worse, but we have to be prepared for the worst also. And let's get connected, all of our panelists also, and let's keep on exchanging ideas, and let's have a support to each one of us. That will help us moving ahead also. And at this point of time, it's all about motivating each other in taking the lead.
Yeah, Ravenda, any quick thoughts?
I would suggest caution for the businesses from starting, and so without advice from the public health experts, I would caution the businesses to start. And second thing is, there has been a lot of, as mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of innovation on logistics in moving goods from the producers to the customers. However, the challenge is disrupted and or interrupted supply chains globally. A lot of global economies were, a lot of national economies were integrated globally, as Rehan has been struggling to export, and some others trying to make the payments internationally. So apart from that, a lot of raw materials need to be procured to produce something locally and sell locally. So global supply chains are also interrupted, and there is a need to address these things. And along with that, it's very important for the businesses to innovate on how to deliver the services to digitally. Economies like South Asian economies and also the developing economies are largely dependent on services. And if the startups, business leaders, and thinkers, CEOs, if they emphasize on providing services digitally, I think that would really have a transformative effect on running and reviving the small and medium businesses. So
Thank you. So wonderful, fascinating discussion. Thanks for your contributions to this panel. I think one important idea is that this enemy is maybe for the first time in the history of humanity a common enemy. Means everybody's in the same situation. Everybody's confronted with the same challenges, and the solutions need to be global, need to be community-based, and at the same time global. And this panel actually demonstrates that. India, Pakistan, Nepal, all over the world, people coming together to find practical solutions for our livelihoods and our health. And that's a very good, very important message in itself. As you can see in my background, that means, I miss South Asia, I miss the world in general, I miss momos from Nepal, I miss chicken korma from India, Pakistani breakfast, all this stuff. So we all miss the world becoming normal again. It's going to take time, it's going to take patience, and is going to take common solutions and common brainstorming like the ones we did today. So again, thanks everybody for participating. This has been a webinar produced by World Learning and Digital Communication Network with support from the Office of Cities and Exchanges, from the State Department. Stay safe, and let's stay in touch, and let's work together in order to find solutions to the pandemic and bring our lives back to normality. So bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating in this. Thanks a lot. Thank you.